Hello everyone. Welcome. Today's topic is about action and combat strategy. Let's take a look. Offensive strategies. What does it mean? The opposition wants to reverse the situation and take power. It all comes down to power, folks. So, to take power, the opposition attacks the vulnerable points of the government, where the government has left some gaps, where the government has left empty spaces, where the government, even though they have the administrative machinery on their side, still hasn't done anything directed towards the citizens. So, the opposition needs to be very strong to try to take power, because after all, the situation is in power, and it's harder, because even a regular government is difficult to bring down, folks. So let's move on to the next slide. Let's look at the offensive strategies the opposition can practice. The first strategy here is the flanking attack. What does a flanking attack mean? It's when the opposition attacks the negative points of the government. For example, the empty space. It's where the government leaves gaps, so the government doesn't show itself much, doesn't make itself available, doesn't present itself to the population. So the opposition takes advantage of this and carries out attacks against it. In a frontal attack, the opposition needs to be very well strengthened with their projects, resources, and support. After all, they have to, at this stage, show that they are doing things fundamentally different from the old politics. They will attack head on, and in the end, close to the election, the debates will happen. And it's through the debates, folks, that everything the opposition attacked in the beginning, they have to prove all of that in the end. Look at the importance of this. Right? Next, we have the siege attack. What is a siege attack? The siege attack is about not letting the situation or the government grow, produce, and making it as difficult as possible for them to govern, folks. And the opposition does this very well. Why? She shows up at the chamber meetings, discusses. And if the opposition is in the majority, what do? They try to downplay the issues, making them seem small in relation to the situation. So you have issues like these, retail problems, that are discussed in the small claims forum, meaning the important things the opposition wants for itself and for the situation. They leave just that little crumb where discussions happen. So that's the point of the siege attack, folks. It's a defensive attack in a way that the opposition does to prevent the situation and governance from happening fully. Next, we have guerrilla attack. What is a guerrilla attack? It's an unexpected and predictable attack. It's one of the worst kinds of attacks there is. Because this attack, in a way, aims to show that the government has deviated from the plans, that it hasn't fulfilled its commitments. And what causes the deviations in the plans? It brings corruption. Folks, it's overpriced projects, things like that. The opposition confronts head on. So, these are strong arguments to come and take power, folks. Let's move on. And let's see what the government can do, what the situation can do in terms of depending on it. Look closely. The government is in power. There's no way to stop him from governing. He has the administrative machine in his hands. All the marketing is done through the communications secretariat within the government itself. So they have everything to stay in power, folks. So the opposition has to be smart enough to work with what we're going to see now. Look. The opposition attacks. But the government's defense is very strong because they are already in power. So what do? Flank defense, position defense. They try not to leave any gaps for the opposition to attack. They work to avoid being vulnerable, folks. They have people, scouts within the government, who are watching every move of the opposition. So in this case, it's a position defense. What does preemptive defense mean? Preemptive defense does the following. It prevents the opposition from launching an attack. What does it mean to prevent the opposition from launching an attack? It's about anticipating, doing something that deters the opposition from attacking. And if the opposition does attack, there will be retaliation. So, you see, this is a very interesting part of preemptive defense. And what about counteroffensive defense? Counteroffensive defense is about having the ability to challenge what the opposition putting forward. You refute what the position is attacking. And you go back and intensely counterattack the opposition's weak points, folks. This is the part about counteroffensive. Next, we have mobile defense. Mobile defense is a very important strategy for governance because with mobile defense, you govern alongside the voters in the neighborhoods. You go to the neighborhoods, you address the people's concerns, the projects, the priorities, and by being there, you deter the opposition from attacking you. So, see the importance of mobile defense. You go to the neighborhoods, you address the people's concerns, the projects, the priorities, and by being there, you deter the opposition from attacking you. So see, importance of mobile defense. Basically, what you do with the population deters or weakens an offensive from the opposition. And then we have withdrawal defense. What does withdrawal defense mean? You recognize a weak point and that the opposition is right about something. That's a virtue, folks. In withdrawal defense, you acknowledge your flaws. So what happens? You have to rely on your strengths and focus on your strengths so that the weak point you recognized and where you failed becomes very small, right? And the population doesn't even notice that slip-up you made because you attack with the strengths you have. And that the population doesn't even notice this mistake you made, because you attack with the strengths you have. And what about your virtues, huh? Now let's go to the arena of timing and know-how. What is know-how? It's knowledge. The area of timing and know-how means that the first dynamic strategic interaction is pioneering. We talked here, as you saw, that the opposition seeks pioneering efforts to do things differently, to fundamentally change things, right? This is important to break the monotony. Because politicians are very predictable. He always says the same thing to everyone all the time. So, if the opposition comes up with something new and innovation, it catches on. It catches on because it's the reason to take power. In the second dynamic strategic interaction, it's imitation. What does it mean? It means you recognize that a government did a job and that you took power, and you acknowledge that some of the projects the government did have value. So, if the project has value, you're going to look to imitate it. We should imitate the good things, folks. It's not to say that the government that came in did nothing useful. We have to take advantage of it, yes. That's a virtue. And the population recognizes this, sees it as a positive point for the government. Okay, so let's move on. This topic was complex. We talked about a few things. The attacks are very varied that occur. And we often refer to these attacks as dirty campaign tactics. This is the name given to bribes, purchases, things like that which bring something negative. to a personal political campaign. Let's recap. We saw that everything comes down to power. Everything. Everything comes down to power. It's everyone's ego, folks. He wants to have power in his hands. And for that, we saw the attacks from the opposition. We saw the government's defense strategies, right? And after that, we saw that the opposition practices pioneering. And the government often practices, or should, often practice imitation, which are the good things that were done to continue, which means continuity solution, continuous improvement, something that rarely happens in the governments we have. The topic of the next class is leadership development, and we will have Elaine here to talk about leadership coaching, folks. She has a lot of knowledge and is specialized in that area. I want to thank you all for your attention, and thank you very much.